Hello and welcome to another episode of SmartMemoryPower.com, and in this one we're going to look at ways to remember things. In particular, I want to focus on the three key principles that you need to kind of look at and that you need to know in order to remember things more effectively. So the first one is to look at the three principles in general. So these principles are association, location, and imagination. All right, those are the three principles that we're going to use to remember things more effectively. And the first one is the power of association. Now, associating will help you have a much better chance of recalling things, okay? So, for example, if you associate something that's already familiar to you with the thing you want to remember, then you'll be able to anchor that new thing into your world, and it will make much more sense that you can remember that thing. This makes an awful lot easier to actually remember things in the first place, and I'll give you some examples of this as we go through. So, for example, you could use something like the link method. This is where you make a connection between all the things you want to remember and actually create a little scene or a series of scenes to, understand what it is that you want to remember. And ideally, all those scenes will interact with each other. So this is the link method, and I'll show you an example right now of how this works. So let's say, for example, you want to remember a shopping list, all right? And if you have a pen and paper handy, you might want to write these down. You've got, let's say, chicken, potatoes, asparagus, washing powder, and orange juice, all right? So you've got 5 things right there on that list. You could imagine something pretty crazy, like, for example, why not have the chicken juggling some asparagus while it's doing something, while it's putting the washing on, or maybe it's doing it on top of a washing machine. Well, that's 3 things that you've remembered. It could also be balancing on top of a potato, like a circus act, and you could somehow get the orange juice in there as well. I'm just kind of making this up on the spot, but even the idea of the chicken standing on a potato juggling some asparagus is a pretty funny image. And as I walk around the corner of an aisle in the supermarket, I can imagine that in my head, and not only will it kind of be quite funny and make me laugh, but it also means I remember the 3 things that are going on in that particular image. So this is something you could easily do, and the more fun and the more silly and the more crazy or weird or whatever that you can make these images, the better. It's a weird set of images, obviously, but I like the idea of a juggling chicken because it's bizarre and funny, and therefore I'll remember it much better. Now, location is the second principle, and this is a really cool one. If you can anchor what you want to remember in a specific place, you stand a far better chance of it sticking in your mind. And we're going to anchor those things into your mind, and again, I'll show you an example. Now, one of the great ways to do this is a method called the journey method, which is also known as loci, which comes from the Latin meaning places, and it involves picturing a journey in your mind that's familiar to you. Now, the easiest way to do this is using your own house or your own apartment. So plot a journey around your house or your apartment, and you can actually then use that journey to remember things. So, for example, you could go and put the first thing you want to remember in the first room, and then move into the next room, and that's where the second thing is you want to remember. And then you go into the third room, and then there's the next thing you want to remember. Go up the stairs, and there's another thing at the top of the stairs, and you can just plot things out around your house like that. Again, you can do this using the link method as well, so you can actually have something like, for example, the idea of the juggling chicken. You can have that in the first room, and that's 3 things already within the first room that you can remember. If the chicken, like I say, is standing on a potato juggling some asparagus, then you've got that in your head already, so that when you walk into your house in your mind and you go into the first room, you see the chicken, it's juggling, it's standing on a potato. Well, there's the 3 things that you need from that part of the supermarket, for example. That might work. So that's another really important one. Now, imagination is the last one, and I've kind of touched upon this with some of the crazy things I've suggested that you can use to remember. So both association and location give your brain ways to remember things that it likes. And often, if you come up with an image, it's worth noting that when you come up with the image, the first one that comes into your mind is usually the strongest association for your brain. Don't try and make it contrived. The juggling chicken was something that made me laugh when I was creating this presentation. So as a result, I thought that's the one I'm going to use because it's one that makes sense in my head and makes me laugh as well. So I think that's kind of a funny thing. But you might have a completely different association with those. And the first thing that pops into your head is usually the one that you should go with. Now, your memory isn't just one specific part of your brain. Your brain remembers using all of your senses. In fact, it's been recently proven that your smell memory, which is known as your olfactory memory, is actually incredibly powerful, and perhaps the most powerful of all the senses when it comes to remembering. By using your imagination, you allow your brain to make multiple associations for the same memory. That, of course, strengthens the memory in itself, okay? So use multiple associations for the same thing, and you'll be able to get a much clearer picture of that in your mind. So, for example, you could go ahead and use your imagination to remember something using a sense of smell. It could be something that you've seen. It could be something that maybe something you've created yourself, that you've drawn. Maybe it could be something that you can touch that reminds you of that particular thing. There's a whole load of ways to remember it using all of your senses. So go ahead, let your imagination run wild. One really smart way to improve your imagination is to read challenging fiction. And when I say challenging fiction, I don't mean, the latest Jackie Collins or the latest, airport novel that you can find in bookstores. I mean stuff that actually really stimulates your mind and makes you think in ways that you perhaps didn't think before. Things that are maybe a classical, or things that are sort of more legendary books, for example, like Of Mice and Men. That's a very short book to read, but it's one of those books that again makes you think in a different way. It's emotional. It gives you very clear feelings and clear ideas about things, and the language is beautiful and it's incredibly well written. So these are all things you could go ahead and use. Also, allow yourself to fantasize and daydream about things that you want to do to keep your imagination working. If you can imagine things very clearly in your mind, like, for example, the house you want to live in, or the car you want to drive, or the people that you want to share your life with, that's, again, a very powerful thing, and it will actually help your memory as well. So go ahead, start reading and start understanding things a bit more, and actually allow your imagination to run wild. It's important to note as well, it's much more powerful to read something than it is to watch it on video, purely because you learn things in a different way when you have to read, because it's a much more active way of learning. Watching can be quite passive unless you're taking notes or really thinking about stuff. So hopefully you've been taking notes during this presentation, and you will therefore get the benefit of it as well when you start to actually apply this in your own life. So there you go, the three key principles. With association, you can use the link method. For location, you can use the journey method, and obviously those two methods in themselves help you out with the third principle, which is that of imagination. So I hope that's all been useful for you. There they are, the three key principles. So thank you so much indeed for being part of this episode. I hope you've enjoyed it, and as always, head over to smartmemorypower.com for more memory tips and tools. And also make sure you go and check out the videos that we've got for you over on YouTube at youtube.com/smartmemorypower. We're also on Twitter, twitter.com/teammemorypower. So I look forward to chatting to you on there, or seeing you over on the site. And as always, leave us a comment. Let us know what you think of the post that you're reading, and we'll be in touch, and maybe we can create a video that helps you to achieve something with your memory. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you again very soon.